Hello and welcome guys to the beautiful, and I mean really beautiful, Discipline Priest testing. And right now we're testing Mind Games, which is the Venthyr ability that recently got buffed. Assaults the enemy mind, dealing a certain amount of damage and briefly reversing their perception of reality. For 8 seconds, the next damage that they deal will heal their target instead, and the next healing that they'll deal will damage the target. So it's a minute cooldown, but generally speaking, it's not the main thing I want to talk about right now. I wanted to talk about how fun Discipline Priest is with the new combination of Mind Blast and Shadow World Death when combined with the beautiful legendary where reduces the cooldown of Shadow World Death by 8 seconds and causes its damage to trigger Atonement. Now, if Shadow World Death triggers Atonement, it's a useful spell. So if you really think about it, you got these two mini cooldowns with Mind Blast and Shadow World Death when combined with Shadow Covenant, where for the 9 seconds your shadow spells deal 25% increased damage and healing, but you cannot cast holy spells. So now you get a whole lot of combinations to deal with a lot of different variation of damage. So for example, right now, if I can use my Mind Blast to do a decent amount of atonement transfer, and it's also going to prevent a certain amount of damage. Because if you read the Mind Blast, Mind Blast costs a lot of mana, but it also prevents the next certain amount of damage that the mob deals. So, again, a lot of different ways. I have a lot of buttons right now. Because if you look at the talents that I'm running on Schism, which is active ability, Solace, Shadow Covenant, and Evangelism. I'm not sure what the meta is going to be, but we're going to try out. So right now we're going to use Radiance. We're going to use Schism, Shadow Covenant, and our Mind Blast is going to deal a whole lot of damage. And then we're going to use Shadow World Death to top it off. Again, when I use Shadow World Death, I should really be careful about it. Because Shadow World Death is going to deal more damage to people who are below 20% HP. And with my Schism and Shadow Covenant, this could mean a lot of damage. Keep in mind, this is a weird interaction that... Let's see if we can get it. This is a weird interaction that I've seen. Shadow Covenant, even though it increases the shadow damage by 25%, does not increase or work with Shadow World Death at this point. But it works with Mind Blast and Mind Games. So Mind Games, if I do this right now, okay, I don't have Schism, but if I go Shadow Covenant right now and if I put Mind Games on a person, it's gonna boost the damage that it deals, and it's also gonna trigger atonements. It also triggers atonement, guys. So apparently certain spells, at least Shadow World Death seems to have a weird interaction. So Schism, Solace, Mind Blast, we're gonna put defensive on the tank, we're gonna use, okay, my keybind is not really working properly, Shadow World Death to finish it off. I should be using, like, at least it feels like from the recent testing that I do, again, this is not perfect gameplay, but far from perfect actually, but I should be definitely using Shadow World Death only if I have atonement or even a shield on me to prevent any accidents from happening, because you'll see how much damage Shadow World Death can actually deal when it's like below 20%. It's actually kind of insane. It's damage increased by 175% to targets below 20%, which is insane when combined with Schism. And if it would actually work with Shadow Covenant, I don't know, man. Is this like, are you approaching levels where you're going to like die? Which is pretty crazy. And on top of that, I have things like Power Infusion, which I can cast on myself to increase haste. I'm gonna put Radiance. Okay, I'm gonna use Schism into Shadow Covenant, into Mind Games, into Mind Blast, and into Shadow World Death. Again, my atonements literally ran out the last second. My atonement literally ran out the last second before I could apply my Shadow World Death, which was a bit sad. But there is multiple different legendaries that a lot of people are looking right now. We're gonna use Schism, Penance, and again, there's a disease happened. There's multiple legendaries that are really approaching. Again, it seems like you have an answer to every situation if you really think about this. If you look at certain legendaries, there is Rapture legendary that a lot of people are also talking about, where during Rapture, Power Word Shield costs 20% less mana and applies 6-second longer atonements. When you combine this with the Conduit ability, and again, my Conduit abilities are pretty interesting, but when you combine the Conduit ability, that's the Penance one, this one here, Rapture's duration is increased, again, this is kind of broken, and its Power Shield enhancement is increased by 10%. people have been testing it, and it has been doing a decent amount of healing. And it's one of the legendaries a lot of people have said it's competitive with your Shadow World Death legendary. And if you look at my potency conduit for the actual ability Mind Blast or Mindgames lasts an additional seconds and deals additional 20% damage and healing. So it's just a flat out increase. So what is the gameplay like for Discipline Priest? Again, applying things like, well, at the moment, you know, you're not sure what the order of spells is going to be, just kind of assuming in terms of, because scaling is always going to change. But I have to say that I'm really fan of Shadow Covenant. Shadow Covenant is kind of expensive. That's the main issue right now. It's a relatively expensive, again, I get scaled down here, but it's a relatively expensive tool that in raids you're definitely going to be very, how do I say it, scared about using unless you know exactly what you're doing. So right now there is damage happening. He pulled a mob. Let's go Schism. My Shadow Fiend thing is not right. We're gonna go Mind Games here. We're gonna go Mind Blast. And again, if you use Shadow Covenant for 9 seconds, you can't cast holy spells, but you can just revert to Shadow Mend healing. Because you have to remember, Shadow Covenant increases your shadow damage by 25%, but it also increases shadow healing. So you can't cast Shadow Mend. So you're not exactly like, oh hey, I'm using Shadow Covenant, 9 seconds I can't cast holy spells, I've just used my Mind Blast, I've just used my, like for example right now, Schism, Shadow Covenant, Mind Blast, into Shadow World Death, like, oh, I can't cast anything, you can just go revert back to Shadow Mend healing. There's legitimately a lot of abilities to keep track of and to optimize and what ability is going to be used, like, especially in raid situations, I feel it's really, really rough to play a Discipline Priest, because I think a lot of people might be like, oh hey, you have Shadow Covenant, I'm gonna use that on cooldown, and honestly you're gonna run out of mana. Or like, oh hey, you got Mind Blast, I'm gonna press Mind Blast and Shadow Covenant constantly. You're gonna be out of mana very, very, very quickly. Those abilities are quite expensive, and they require optimization, they require burst windows to be set up and burst windows to be optimal. So you can't always use it. But in Mythic Plus, where mana is less of an issue, especially because you can drink all the time, I feel like Discipline Priest, I think maybe Blizzard is looking at it and like, hey, now you're gonna have more ways. So right now, Schism, we're gonna use Shadow Covenant, we're gonna use Mind Blast into Shadow World Death, and that should be most of the healing done here. Again, you need to keep in mind, you need to really, the whole combo that I try to achieve seems to be pretty tight in terms of atonement fall off. So I need to make sure that atonements have not fallen off before I'm going to be doing my Shadow World Death as well. So again, more things to optimize, more things to prioritize, or I could combine it with Evangelism in raid situations. Again, I don't want Evangelism. I feel like the last two tiers buffing a single spell barrier is weird. Because I feel like I would like to have a more maybe Mythic Plus oriented ability, because Evangelism usually has been very, very strong in raids. So I'm gonna use Mind Games. Mind Games actually get buffed by Schism, but I didn't align it properly. I should mention that they have changed Holy Nova to kind of shoot again second time type of deal. I don't know if it's going to be usable on, like, you know, big AoE packs or something like that. So let's go Schism, Shadow Covenant, we'll put Evangelism here, Mind Blast, Shadow World Pain, Shadow World Death, and then we're just gonna go with our own. Oh, I forgot Mind Games as well. Mind Games would have done a lot of damage there. Shadow World Death, Mind Blast, and finish off with a Penance. And most of the people who had the disease are pretty okay right now. Again, you also have to mention that just by default, the affix changes that Blizzard proposing, just by default, it's gonna make Discipline Priest better healers, because, again, Priests in general, because Master Spell is gonna be able to dispel bursting stacks, which, again, potentially could be very, very strong. And just as I was about to finish off the run, the servers go down and there's a new build on the beta with some new changes to Discipline Priest, especially with the new tier 50 talent. Just I was talking about the two talents that were buffing barrier. They replaced one with Spirit Shell, and a lot of people might remember a variation of this. For 12 seconds, Penance, Power World Radiance, and Atonements create Absorb Shield instead of healing, and this is a 1 minute cooldown. And This is something that's been added. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to test this yet, so I'm looking forward to that, along with some quality of life changes for Rapture. Immediately power word shield your target, so you don't have to wait for that global cooldown type of deal. And there's been a cap on Holy Nova, and that's kind of weird. But just to summarize the whole video, honestly, I have had so much fun with my Discipline Priest. Maybe it's kind of, I don't know. I'm looking at these two new abilities, Mind Blast, Shadow World Death. I'm looking at Shadow Covenant. I'm not sure if they're going to be useful, how Blizzard is going to turn out its scaling. Is it going to be worth to cast them? But I'm trying to see what Blizzard is trying to interpret with these changes. So I'm assuming that if this is the Blizzard intention to bring Mind Blast into rotation, to bring Shadow World Death with the legendary in the Discipline Priest rotation, along with the possibility of Shadow Covenant, maybe in certain situations, to be part of that rotation to supplement those shadow spells, I feel Discipline is really, really fun. It is relatively complicated with the new buttons, especially for someone who's starting to play a healer the first time and honestly figuring out the best rotation for different types of damage patterns. But I like that. I think the skill ceiling for this is really high. I think Blizzard is paying a lot of attention for Discipline Priest, and that shows with the latest, you know, Spirit Shell changes, with the latest Rapture quality of life improvements. I think Blizzard wants Discipline to do well, and honestly, I've had so much fun. Of course, anything can change. Blizzard can nerf, buff, anything at any given moment, and there's probably going to be a big build next week that kind of mentioned about this. But let me know how you feel about Discipline Priest. My experience so far in raids and even Mythic Plus have been very positive. We'll just see how that's going to turn out when Shadowlands is released. Leave your comments below, and I'll see you in my next guide.